Hello, everybody. It is fantastic to welcome you on July 4th, the Independence Day, and not only for the science fiction movie watchers, it is a very special day. For our American folks, it is quite early, wherever you are living, such as for Marshall, Thomas, and Holger, who is originally coming from Germany for some time ago, at least. And we welcome everybody to share his comments, put his question into the chat, as we do have an opportunity to discuss with you directly. And today we have a topic which is quite interesting from our perspective, and we hope also from yours. CRM and CX in an AI world. What is it all about? And can the smaller guys survive as well? Or is it only for the big boys? And Holger, out of your experience and being an chap who has been with Thomas for a certain time, starting from Kiefer and Feitinger, then going for SAP.
It makes us old.
No, well, it's simply the aspect that I wanted to ask you if you, as a consultant, have ever participated in one of these very old, nice, cozy booths on the Seabit show. Because at that time, when it still was Kiefer and Feitinger, I was standing on the other side from Update Marketing, an Austrian-German company at that time.
Headquartered in Munich.
Well, that update was in Wiesbaden, not the ones which were running on ERP.
Even before the cloud, too many updates to process them.
Yes.
Too many updates, I can't handle this. Too many in Germany.
It's fascinating, and I would like to share a bit with the audience what you have experienced over the years, and some of your career steps would be very nice to share.
Okay. Are you asking both me and Thomas, or are you asking just me?
No, Thomas, I'm curious about you.
Nobody cares about us, man.
No, well,
okay. Well, I got to software more or less from a professional perspective by accident. Right? So it shows you that the most carefully crafted career plans. Right? I mean, I was programming as a teenager for fun. We were lucky. My dad was a math teacher. Went to computer science. We got a computer at home in '82 because he had to prepare for his classes, right? It was phenomenal. What was it? The 16 kilobyte on a ROM, basic on HP machine. So fascinating. And then here comes the irony, right? You see my background is UCSD, right? And this is San Diego. Then there was disk-based Pascal, C, like better programming languages than BASIC. From UCSD, which I had no idea pre-internet what it means. It was not on the manuals, right? Bits were expensive. It was just UCSD Pascal. And here I am, like years later, oldest daughter studied at UCSD, right? So we come to full circle to the wonders of like, what is these 4 letters? Doesn't matter. The software works. I can do Pascal. Yeah, I can do C. Yeah. So. And then I grew up in the shadows of BASF, right, close to Ludwigshafen. So half of the kids in my class, parents worked at BASF. I like to study chemistry, but thought that would be too narrow. So I thought I'd do business at the University of Mannheim and do chemical technology as a minor, which I did also for my sanity. But I thought I would work at BASF, and with all the connections after 2 years, my internship still fell flat. So I saw like a small consulting company asking, like, we look some people to program. I said, fine, I'll do some programming this summer. And turned out to be Kiefer and Feitinger. Was the second, third person there. I remember Klaus Feitinger proudly showing me, and we have a server now. And the server was in the bathroom of the apartment that Georg Kiefer just vacated, right? And connecting to the printer was by bringing the printer cable to connect it, right? So early days, but I wouldn't have missed it.
That is history. And that reminds me to the first days in update marketing in some area of Rhine-Wiesbaden, where it also was in a private home, which they stuffed in the living room as being the conference room, and where they had 4 desktops and 4 tables residing. And if you came from outside, you still had an option to take a shower in the bathroom. Yeah, that was not occupied as business room. That was still in its original function. But that's really interesting, such as you are in the real core of where it happened at Kiefer and Feitinger.
Yeah. But more or less almost from day one. We were just off a pivot. I missed the pivot, right? The original idea of Georg Kiefer and Klaus Feitinger, I think the statute of limitation has passed, so we can talk locally, was to do at the time, was doing a graphic service, right? Companies would do slides and do a graphic service on demand, kind of like you would share to them, they would print them out, deliver them to you. For whatever reason, that didn't seem so pan out so well, but there was still all these, how they're called, plotters around to do the slides. Plotter farm, basically. And they pivoted into sales consulting and got a large American company, DuPont, to build a CRM or SFA system at the time for it.
Yeah.
Right? So, and I came along when another division wanted to have one as well, and I tested it, wrote documentation, helped with training it, and so on. The rest is history.
And then it became SAP CRM.
Yeah, here's the quiz for you, Marshall and Ralph. So, true or false? When I met Thomas for the first time, he had a full bunch of hair, and I still have had gray hair. What is true? What is false?
You had gray hair, and he had not a full bunch of hair.
You have too much insight on Thomas then.
I spilled the beans.
So insider knowledge. Yeah. Marshall was thinking. I saw that.
I would only have been able to guess about your hair, but I knew that Thomas has been shiny for decades now.
Decades. So I'm talking about like 92 or somewhere when the Thomas started at KMUs. So keep on fighting.
5. Yeah. 95. Okay.
Time flies. What is 3 years?
3 years, but my God, at our age, right?
Rounding error. It's like, how do I feel this morning? I'm 2 years older or 2 years younger, right?
As you made the right choice on that fantastic opportunity on 4th of July, on Independence Day, having some time together with us, not sitting at a comfortable place, enjoying the free day, or doing some patriotic firecracking and fireworking, probably later that day.
Is enjoying the day.
Yeah, it's a little bit too early for that.
Yeah, well,
no plans from my side. I might go and admire them if the weather allows. It's foggy in the coast, so usually you don't see anything. It's kind of like San Francisco 4th of July fireworks, where you say, "Oh, look, that cloud is blue. Oh, that cloud is red." So,
so you are still living in the Bay Area?
No, I live in San Diego since 2007. So,
okay.
Do you want to go to the whole station of what's in LinkedIn, or we can save people from that? Or do you want to hear that? I don't know. It doesn't matter to me. Happy to chat. So.
It was simply curiosity, as I have been to San Francisco, which is, as a European, one of my favorite cities, at least at the last time I have been there. And everything is changing. So don't know how San Diego developed so far. It was always a city which was hard to walk at, nearly not possible. But I learned a lot on bus riding in San Diego.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that hasn't changed. It's still much very car-centric city. It has a too small downtown. I mean, almost 2 million people live in San Diego. This is a historic picture of downtown from Coronado in my background. There's a bunch of more skyscrapers, and they're building condominiums left and right. But it's like decentralized, like lots of mini little centers, which you can walk to. I can walk to my local strip mall here, like it's like a kilometer, so that's fine. But to connect them and to go, it's very much a car-centric city, and that's why we have all the beauty of congestion and all the other good things of that. But still, if you want to, you can use public transport. I mean, if I would like to catch a flight, I just have to leave 3 hours before the flight to make it, versus now I leave like 90 minutes before the flight to make it with traffic, right? So it's a convenience factor, which I guess my fellow San Diegans are equally choosing. But in general, I mean, San Diego, I always joke it's the better bay, much smaller bay, the San Diego Bay than the San Francisco Bay. But I mean, it's better weather, not this year necessarily, lower cost of living, better education, and more diverse. Not everybody's talking about high tech, right? There's people who work in other aspects in healthcare, a big healthcare place. Pfizer moved they centralized their R&D lab here about 11 years, 12 years ago. So huge pharmaceutical influence. And with that, of course, the people who tried to poach people from Pfizer came here. So everybody has a lab here now. Lots of university part, lots of defense part, lots of military part. So good or bad, I'll leave it up to you guys, but it's much more diverse than the very high-tech centric Bay Area, which is nice too. But it's nice to go out in a bar and people talk about other problems than what is AI doing for CRM, right? Well, I love to talk to you.
There are other things to talk about.
Now that you bring that up,
let's switch to that one.
So,
sounds good.
It's to some extent it's inspired by what you said at the Holics. So where you were quite suspicious about the chances of a smaller vendor in this big boy game. So it's probably good to start with your opinion there, once that you relate on the suspicions that you relate then to have a good start now, and then let's dig into a discussion.
And
what makes you
you're asking,
suspicious?
sorry, missed that?
To what extent?
For Marshall?
No, that was for you.
Me again?
Yeah, always. No, it's always you. It's always you. You are our star.
Oh,
here.
it's 3 against 1. I see. I haven't seen the show.
You have
myself.
Yeah.
No, I think AI is going to be a dramatic disruption to enterprise software, and we have not even seen the tip of that. And especially for CRM, in my view, right? If I compare that, and science, if I compare that like to the other like the functional areas, like HCM is going to have massive chainless disruption too, but it's more on the aiding side. Manufacturing, I don't see it so much. I mean, the robots are pretty much already there. Finance, what can you do? What will you do? Right? But the interactivity of CRM, right? That you have to bring together your value creation with the demand of a customer who wants to have something. That has a lot of manual individual work yet, where there's the chance to disrupt that with artificial intelligence. And every time we have a technology disruption like this, we can see a complete change in the marketplace, right? If you look at historically, like how many ERP vendors have been weeded out by the move to client server, right? SAP is only SAP today because everybody else pretty much failed to move to client server, right? So, and I think that gives the small guys a tremendous opportunity, because the big guys, there's pretty much only one big guy, which is Salesforce right now. They've been struggling, and we could talk about Salesforce in a moment later if you want. I'm more optimistic on them recently due to the developments, but your installed base and your revenue stream coming from the traditional model of operating, right, makes you automatically skeptical about the change and not ready to do disruption, right? You don't want disrupting yourself. It's very, very, very difficult. I've only seen that in one part of one enterprise done really Harvard textbook style, and we can talk about that if you guys want. But I see a big challenge for Salesforce going ahead to remain the big guy, in that if they don't embrace AI in the right way, in the right innovative way, in the right disruptive way, right? Because the disruption for new technologies like this will not come from the big guys, right? The big guys will react. And the big question for us as pundits is, are they reacting? First of all, are they not saying, forget this AI thing, right? It's a fad, it's going to go away. And then they will potentially buy someone, right? And then they will try to get it. And then the question is, will they get it good enough, right? And me being a platform-centric guy, that's my coverage, right? For everybody, I don't cover CRM. That's my colleague, Liz Mueller. She does CX. We can debate CRM versus CX forever here. I love that. Watch the videos we have on that. I mean, don't get me started. Don't poke me on that. But on the platform side, that's what I look, because having built software for 25 years, I know if your platform isn't right for a certain use case, there's no chance that you can play there. You can do fabulous marketing, you can win time, you might buy someone, but you cannot play there. Question mark. question. Go ahead, Ralph.
Yeah, now you know something you have yet missed in not being part of the show as guest or watching us, that I'm the guy with the analog stream part, such as I show the signs and make myself available with some in between. Question is, you mentioned that you do have some doubts that some of the market players can make it or will make it, as they are too fat, too slow, too lethargic, put it that way. And some others are small, probably agile, and understand the need fast enough. But don't they have a hurdle with enough money in the background, which the big boys do have?
I think it's not a question of money for the SaaS vendors, right? The SaaS
that's a good one.
Right, so the SaaS vendors, which are loved by the infrastructure as a service vendors, the cloud platform vendors, because they bring workload. And people who are very popular, they're like super attractive. Which cloud can have you first if you have a startup in the SaaS space? And they will give you compute for free or at a good price, right? Totally different story if you run your own data centers as a software, as a service vendor, like Salesforce is doing right now. Totally different story if you're an infrastructure as a service vendor, right? I mean, quick segue, right? How disruptive AI is. I think AI, because of the capital requirements, has a chance to change our current landscape of the cloud platform market, from Amazon being the clear leader to then Microsoft, to then Google, and then Oracle, and whoever else comes in. Because of the capital investiture, right? I mean, look at Oracle spending more than 50% of open cash flow in CapEx right now, right? Which is 7 billion. They've never spent 7 billion, and never more than 50%. It used to be 1 or 2 billion. And that means it's capital intensive. And Amazon, just to give the argument there, follows their retail strategy. They have the money, but they have to put it there to build out something which serves, back to CRM, a retail company, an online retailer, right, which has different needs in terms of putting NVIDIA CPUs in there than somebody who's building a cloud to compete and share the market space. It's super capital intensive, right? And Microsoft, to give you the example, right, the OpenAI supercomputer they probably built is triple million number, right? It's a low triple million number, but a low triple million number, that is 2 AWS regions with all the retail revenue coming behind. So for Andy Jassy, it's a super pickle right now to say, hey, do I spend 100 million buying NVIDIA chips and compete with everybody in that? Or do I go to, I don't know, Malaysia, whatever, and I have a multiple billion retail revenue by putting a data center in there, which serves our traditional stack of doing online retail. Quick segue, sorry, apologies. But it's the first time I say this publicly, so you have the honor to be the launch guinea pig customer. So put it in the comments.
You heard it here first.
If you love it.
You heard it here first. Means I now should take a note of the timestamp, which is at about 16 minutes when you started, to do the cut, yeah?
Yes, so when it ever happens that our friends at Gartner or IDC, right, say that AWS is no longer number one, I might have been the first to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When
and it pushed the guilt and pressure on me to write at least a blog post about it. So.
Well, we probably have our AI do that, but then it's, as it is so capital intensive, this basically means that the smaller vendors, so the SaaS companies, that probably would to include these services and these services on their own, or their own services, are outpriced basically, because they can't build
the small cloud vendors.
Centers. Yeah.
The small cloud vendors, right? If an OVH cloud, right, I love them dearly as a European cloud vendor, have the money to put enough NVIDIA machines or whatever as the popular CPU in there, I'm not sure. I doubt it, right? I mean, you can see that. I mean, if you step even one more, if you want to geek out even more towards the AI part, right? Who will win in the AI game? Who can run more AI cheaper and faster? And that, we know that is dependent on putting your custom AI algorithm, which hopefully you made an open source standard and to open source and became a standard, on your custom hardware, right? And that's where Google has a 3 to 4 year lead on everybody else.
Wow.
Yep. So AWS, I mean, I remember being at start for the market leader at reInvent, where Werner Vogels was saying, oh, this is just a bunch of regression analytics. It's 4 years ago. Time flies, maybe 5 years ago, right? And then now in their second generation of their own custom chip. but they don't have a custom software framework, which for Google is, of course, TensorFlow, riding on the Tensor boards, right? And already maybe 5 years ago, right, we could decide on a whim to buy Tensor boards for 1 hour, which would cost us the cost of a business class flight to Europe, $6,000, which is expensive, but we could afford it. And we would have more capacity than a Cray supercomputer. So at the time, right? So think about, we are the little guys, right? Compared to whoever is funded and so on, right? If we can get the compute of a supercomputer for 1 hour, for whatever we want to do to finalize the CRM versus CX debate, right? Then we would be, so I think it will helping. Other people have to put up the CapEx to buy these machines and make this infrastructure available. And people will make mistakes to buy the wrong CPUs, the too slow CPUs, to price it too expensive. Lots of things which can go wrong for the infrastructure vendors, but for the software guys, perfect. I mean, take the example of European hot natural language startup, generative AI startup, Alex Alpha, right? Out of Heidelberg. I mean, I thought the guy is somewhere from Eastern Baltic states, but he has the same accent like me and Thomas speaking English. Ralph has a different kind of English accent. I don't know. I can't localize it. So, but by the way, Ralph, your red and black glasses are always a highlight, right? So, I'm not in costume, not officially. It's a day off, right? Red and black. It's my soccer team. So red and black glasses. Ralph, if I had something to hold up here, I don't have anything to hold up. Keep the red and black glasses up. So different accents. So back to Alex Alpha, right? I mean, they couldn't get enough compute from the traditional people who provide compute, which basically is Microsoft, whatever, AWS. I don't know where they tried it. So they made this marriage with HPE, who have now put their Cray supercomputers into the public cloud, or they will do that, to run the language model of Alex Alpha, which is a smart move from HPE side, because most of their on-premise customers who are still buying HPE machines are, guess what, in Europe. They care for multilingual. Who does only 5 out-of-the-box multilinguals? Alex Alpha. Alex Alpha doesn't have one to build their models. They need someone to do their compute. And buried in the release down there is, and by the way, we have an HPE ProLiant machine which will run these things perfectly on premises. And all European CIOs said, hey, I have a local champion data strategy, right? So it shows like
GDPR,
And Alex Alpha actually, by the way, did it wrong, because if I understood it right, they build their own data centers. Big mistake, right? That's the way for disaster, right? If you're a software company in the AI space and you waste talent and money to build data centers, I mean, you can only lose. Right? You can only lose in the bidding war for like the 40,000 DGX machines from NVIDIA. There's no way you can win.
It's an interesting aspect. So if I'm a little one and I'm smart enough that
A little what? Sorry to jump in. A little what?
A little software company in the CX CRM area. And I just made my way in getting in the SaaS model out of client server, such as CAS, such as Cobra or somebody else, Smart CRM, just to name 3 out of Germany. So nobody knows them in the United States. How do I get my AI properly ordered? And what would be your suggestion to jump in to deliver some kind of a service where a smaller but faster market participant could make his money, his beef, and win customers and get a good opportunity to deliver the service the large ones are not delivering yet?
Right. No, great question. So I'm always a fan of starting with low-hanging fruit, which is the no-brainer, and will get you going, will get you started, show immediate value to your customers. And if you think about sales, think about how many people work in sales ops to support salespeople, right? So there's a ratio of 1 to 2 people, depending on the industry, of people working in the background for 10 people working in the field. Right? There's a ton of digital exhaust which you have inside of the house, like approving travel, approving conditions on deals, approving legal clauses, and so on. These are all things where you have digital exhaust and digital artifacts in your enterprise, specific to you, where you can give those sales ops people a legs up and the salespeople a chance to do sales faster. And that's always the justification, the ROI for CRM, which is always very hard to get, as you guys know. But at the moment I can increase sales velocity, right, then I can have a good chance to have an ROI, right? So, and it's no question, does it work? Is it the right thing? Is it data sensitive? All your sales ops approvals, all your sales ops works, whatever it is, presentations, material, up-to-date pieces, tailor them, generate them, writing proposals, all the factory in the background to get an RFP out, right? There's tremendous no-brainer, 100% working, no worries. I give it to the big guys in the cloud. Everybody's going to see my conditions or my sales structures. That's where I would start as a little, like you call them little. I don't remember CS being little. They were the major thorn to us at Keyboard Fighting us. So,
no.
So that's where I would start, right?
Yeah.
So there's no question that AI is a solution in search of a problem. There are clear and valid use cases now that are making a difference.
Absolutely right.
In contrast to metaverse.
But it can go wrong, right? I gave you an example of my coverage area. Right, so in HCM, everybody's looking at job descriptions, works perfectly because all the job descriptions are public, right? If today you write a job description and you don't have it done by generative AI, you're basically hurting your employer to pay you, right? Because they're excellent, right? There's like little tweaking you might have to do, but for like mainstream stuff, very, very good. So everybody's chasing that and other things, and often it's recycled old AI, right? Every time when the conversation comes to generative AI and vendors say, oh, we've been doing this since a long time, it's recycling existing stuff, which was done without knowing what generative AI can do. So they say, okay, fine. Acknowledge that it's new for everybody. You're figuring out what to be done. And for HR, the low-hanging fruit is the employee handbook. Right? 25% of the time spent by the divisional departmental HR people is Ralph wants to know how he can take his overtime. And Marshall wants to know he changed his bank account, and Thomas needs to know because one of his kids got off his payroll what it means for his benefits or whatever. And then the quick point is like, the HR people happy. I will answer your questions happily. We have a nice chat. It's important for the human connectivity tissue, no question about that. But there's a 20% of my cost. And at the end of the day, hey, thank you, Marshall, Thomas, Ralph for showing by. But by the way, it's all in our new interactive, perfectly styled employee handbook. And you go, oh, yeah, I got that one somewhere. I stored it as a PDF or printed out on my desk collecting dust. Right? So it will perfectly work for just number crunching, your figuring out what's in your employee handbook, what's in your benefits guide for North America. Like any internal procedures should be available with an AI assistant to talk to and immediately have the answer, and help companies, like back to my super high level research area, to move faster, become more agile, or practice what I call enterprise acceleration. Yeah, and none of the vendors are doing this, and I'm telling them this in half a year. They're all in the difficult cases, like on job description, hiring profiles, interview guides, which is possible, right? It's a long trail of adoption, and it's always difficult if you're disrupting something with technology, if you fundamentally change the way how people work, right? Because if your software is good to have a recruiting conversation, the first thing is that everybody who works in the recruiting company at a company who are your customers, they say, oh my God, it's going to take my job away. I don't want that. I can't have that happen, right? So that doesn't help your adoption, right? So it's better if you complement what the majority of user base does as an established vendor, whereas as a little guy who just has an idea, you can completely disrupt them, right? I mean, give the hiring manager, who's like, stay in the recruiting example, who always have the conversation then, give the hiring manager the conversation guide, the rating across the people with generative AI or whatever, and they will pay for it out of their own pocket, because instead of on July 4th reading resumes, they say, hey, I'm the best candidate. This is why. Yeah.
Now, why is it then that exactly those scenarios that you put into the more higher hanging fruit category are the ones that vendors advertise a lot?
Because they've been working on them before generative AI came along. They're familiar with them, and they're recycling what they're doing. Right? So,
yeah, but they didn't work then, and they don't work now.
They have a much better chance to work now, right? The job description 100% works, right? So
yeah, job description
today. Yeah. But you can see how much people who were at the right forefront on executive level have been surprised by what you can do with generative AI, right? Let's talk about coding for a moment, right? Microsoft, right, who's been on the forefront and provides the IDE of the world, love or hate it, with Visual Studio, right? They did not realize that with all the code that you can generate, and it's amazing what can be done, right? You can completely build Power App solution by voice. Yep, by voice, right? So, but for a pro coder, it has changed to the point that you generate code and you copy and paste code. So your editor has to reflect that you're editing. It's been called an editor all the time, and not give me the productivity to write from line 1 to line 10,000 till my program is done. And so Microsoft didn't understand that I'm copy and pasting multiple pieces into my code, which needs some replacement and so on for me to do my company standard, or because the generative AI is always buggy with the same thing. So all people who are pro coders and using generative AI to do code are doing stuff on the side. Ironically, some of them using Microsoft tools like Word to have a macro to text and replace the bugs with generative AIs, and then copy and paste them into the editor. Right? So Microsoft, right? So it shows you how hard it is to put innovation in your own product, even if you are the disruptor, not even if you're the disruptor to us to react, right? So it's the conventional existing thinking, right? And Microsoft did not reinvent the IDE experience for the developer, which sits on top of generative AI.
Let's get back to the HR case. I mean, creating job descriptions, job postings is one thing, but what they are also increasingly using is creating interview questions, or and where I get the shiver is vetting people via the machine. So, and in how far is that more a danger than a chance?
Yeah, but keep in mind, the vetting before was super crude, right? I mean, I'm not gonna, you can look up on LinkedIn who I worked for, right? Where I worked for an employer would only hire from 7 universities, and your GPA had to be better than 3 point or 4 point, I don't remember. So that's what text processing could get out of that, right? And then you had to be done in 4 years, right? Think about how much talent would fall out of that. And now I can use generative AI to crunch across those resumes, and I can figure out, oh, somebody speaks a few languages, has worked there, has done an internship at a company, which is interesting, right? So I can unleash much more to the resume passing game, and then understand what are relevant features, right? Which is the interesting thing, right? It's not just a dump, I say before, search for this, and then we'll see what comes out of it, but understand what has been successful for the people I hired 2 years before. Right? So I can say, let's crunch what we've seen before and see who has done a good career, who stayed, who's happy, who's a good contributor. What are the features, criteria on their resumes, and then unleash that against the resumes, right? So that is the interesting. That's the power of the automation.
The obvious weak point is that not everybody is a good author of CVs.
Sure, but you can we're back to the very basics, Thomas. I mean, it's a great point, right? AI is only as good as the data. Right? I mean, if you forgot to put your resume into the envelope when we applied at Kiefer Fighting, right? I was lucky I could walk by and do an interview. I didn't have to send a resume. I could just interview, right?
Apparently managed to get into the envelope too.
I don't know anybody who got hired sending by a mistake or by purpose an empty envelope when the company said, "Hello, Mr. Lager, did you mean to not put your resume into the envelope? But do you want to send us another one?" I've not heard those stories, right? But like back to you stand and fall on data in the AI world, right? Luckily, we have more data. And this comes back to the typical naysayer. I think like, oh, our data is not clean enough. We have to scrub the data. Our data is in the wrong location. And all these people are usually the naysayers of not adopting AI and using data as an excuse for it, right? Because you have to keep in mind, there's a competitor of yours who's potentially using this. And if the AI is good enough and delivering on half of what it promises, you'd be in a hell of a problem, which you don't want to be in, basically.
And hopefully
you don't want to be the company that says, why can't we get any people hired anymore, right? And it's because you're inviting them to interviews and the other guys are Zoom interviews and people work from home anyway, right? This happened to some companies, right? So there's nobody coming to our seasonally campus hiring at the university, right? Because the students work from home today.
They study from home,
That is a fun part, but going back to, if you look to the landscape, even of smaller, less known or whatsoever candidates in the CRM arena, where would you see who learned his lesson trying to help sales people to do an easier job?
Oh, I need to see what Brian is saying.
Let's bring
My
Brian in
colleague-
between, because
Yeah.
he is known for good questions.
Yeah,
Also good answers, by the way.
Brian is raising a super good question, right?
Yeah.
It's not only about looking who you have who works, right? But I mean, that's the first data source that you have, which companies are not tapping into. The next thing is like, if I'm not good with that result, Brian is absolutely right. I might not have hired the best people, right? I might only get the mediocre people that I have right now, which I think are great, right? So you have to have some alternate parts. And that comes back to the capital intensive part that you want to run. You have to run as much AI as possible. It's not like, oh, we're going to bring this thing there, train it, model it. So I'll give you the example, right? I live here in San Diego because I left Oracle to run products at a company called FICO, the FICO score, but also very relevant and still the market leader in credit card fraud, right? Built very interestingly on already back then. A neural model was IP of the company FICO bought here in San Diego agency. But the process was like, it took 6 months. The banks would send the tapes. Some of my gray hairs from the causal banks, oh, we sent you 5 tapes, only 3 got there. And by the way, we forgot to encrypt those. Where are those tapes with customer data? So that's some of my gray hair. I blame it on the bank's lax procedures. But then also interesting, right? Because it was already back then to compute, right? And as parts of statute of limitations, we paid extra, about double for a server, to steal a server with the right configuration for that problem of the data which was there from a number of hardware vendors, which then would be very apologetic to the customers. Sorry, something went wrong in the factory in Tulsa. The server is no longer available. That server was running under a data scientist desk in San Diego just to win the 6 weeks to have a custom server built. And so this is how important pre-cloud that was. But then it would take half a year, on more than half a year of data. So fraud developed farther. And if you remember that in the fraud era, the PIN chip was coming out in the UK, and people felt, oh, that's going to end fraud. This is like 2007, 2008. And it will not happen. It took half a year to break it, right? So you were always behind from that perspective, right? So yes, the data is important. You can't do this in old data. It has to continuously work. And back to Brian's question, it has to be continuously fine-tuned, and with also the alternatives, like who are the best people in the market? Can I find out who the competition is hiring? Can I scrape in LinkedIn to see where the people I interviewed ended up to, right? And why did they end up to? And let's monitor their progress on that, right? One example which works perfectly from that perspective is, and I think it's a crime that when we go and see a doctor and a human is looking at the radiology example of our X-ray, of our MRI, right? Because humans have good days, bad days, and yeah, we all love humans, but humans make mistakes. Now, what if your radiologist, out of talking to you, figures out that thing that he didn't see turned out to be a bad thing? Who goes back to the X-rays, MRIs, where there was a bad thing for all of the population? Nobody does. And that's the beauty of cloud, healthcare capabilities with AI combination, that you can have software revisit other data, older data, to help people who are still sitting on the data. Might be in a similar, in this case, healthcare, health trajectory from that perspective. And the other thing, of course, super important, right? How do we eliminate, you haven't brought it up, bias?
Right? I just wanted to get into that one.
Yeah.
That is the big question, isn't it?
Guys, to me, I understand it, but it's, again, very much a question coming from the naysayer, and let's not do something part of it, because you can only be as good as your data, right? And your data naturally is biased, right? Now comes a super tricky part. What do you do with your biased data? You generate synthetic data to balance your existing data out with synthetic data to make it unbiased. We are a totally diversified, inclusive, equity enterprise. If that would be our employee population, that would be the synthetic generated resumes. Let's train the AI for that. Nobody has done this. I don't know what the outcome is. The alternative is you tweak the algorithm, right? You know our data is biased. We discriminate against people who have a German accent, right? So we make sure that every 50th person that we make a proposal or we interview must have a strong, thick accent, and there's enough digital artifacts out there from Thomas and me to make sure, hey, that is how thick or strong that accent would be. Just making it a funny example here. Yeah. So do you tune the data? Do you manipulate the data? Right? What could go wrong there? Or do you put your fingers on the scale of the algorithm? There is no good answer from what I can say. There's only the part of looking at this, and then legislation changes, right? You just heard what the Supreme Court does to the university hiring, right? I don't know how much software has to be changed for that, right? So I think you have to start working on your data. Be careful, like with everything. And humans, this is what makes me so confident about the usage of AI, at least in the current phase of AI, is that humans are so super good to figure out if AI is crap, doesn't work. I'm not going to spend time with this anymore. This is so off. This is maybe okay, or this is wow. This saved me X minutes in my day. So what does our friend Brian say? Oh, suffering rampant lying by people. LinkedIn is a network of liars, Brian. So no question. yeah, of course.
Is the example I always go back to. Yeah.
How are we going to figure that out, right? How are we going to figure out? Oh my God, I'm in the space industry, whatever. And I'm getting more than 100 people applying from China being SpaceX industries. So how can I say, hey, Alexa, or hey, Google, which are going to wake up now, or whatever, Bing, how many people work for SpaceX in China? 0? Yeah. So there's easy ways of finding out. It's much easier to catch the fraudsters than it was ever before.
Yeah. So it is also very vividly discussed, Holger, to jump in there, that a lot of people which are not paying a penny for a service which is a bit better, but would like to be Schwäbisch and save the money and go for the for free challenge, and then complain that they get a less valid output or some hallucination instead of the one which is paid.
Yeah, so Schwäbisch, first of all, for our English friends, is Scottish, money pinchers, penny pinchers, right? So, for anybody who didn't know the combination.
Schwäbisch,
also very thick accent people.
Yeah, for the non-Germans.
So first of all, I need to poke holes in this hallucination thing, right? I mean, there's a long history of humans, I always see the word wrong, anthropologizing technology, making technology human by giving it names, talking to it, and so on, right? So no, software cannot hallucinate. Right? It might seem to us humans, right? But the hallucination is a disconnection of your rational part to whatever other parts of that, right? No, there's code behind there why it comes up with this answer. So I always think like, no, man, you might have bad AI software, bad code, bad data, but it's not hallucinating. You can look back. And that's the important thing quickly to the ethical AI question and biases. Yeah. The documentation is super important, right? The problem of neural networks is that they're morphing and changing all the time. But if I want to go back in time and figure out why I hired Marshall, I should be able to go back in time and see this is why it fired this way, and this is where I have to figure out, sorry, Marshall, we shouldn't have hired you, lucky bastard. You didn't have a
story of my life. Yeah.
Just kidding. And sorry, Ralph, I forgot the question now. You were saying... Because you got me off rail of hallucination here. So
yeah, the hallucination part was if somebody is Scroogey and money concerned and wants it for free, then he gets a lesser quality than the one where he pays for. That was my assumption. And
yeah, but it's a free world. Maybe, maybe not. We don't know, right? Maybe the cheaper one has free capacity and there's competition and they want to run more customers and they overspoil you. It's really your decision, right? I mean, you get 100 resumes or you get 20 leads on your table and you start looking for them. You only have time for 2. And after 8, you start selling to them because you don't want to go for the other ones because these ones are good enough or likely enough, right? So humans will always make decisions how much they spend time-wise, which is our most precious resource, money-wise, and next probably, in their business activity, right? So why should AI change that, right? I don't see the disadvantage from that. I see the disadvantage for someone working at a company who is AI phobic, right? And is not giving me the tools for me to compete, for me in sales to make my quota, right? For me in customer service to look, my competitors I have shorter hold times because they're using AI and people are happy to speak to a bot. And I have people who are yelling at me that they were 15 minutes on hold and all the competition is 2-3 minutes and they're dropping us because the competition is using AI for it, right? Yeah.
That's a very good example, yeah. And I wanted to jump into the one about that if you are a fan of freemium, luckily I was born in Cologne, so I understand your dialects, but I speak a different one. And more fun to have that I was hooked up to buy a professional account because DeepL gave me a lot of positive proof of concept that they did better translation than other for free translators, Bubble or Babylon or Google or
Translate,
whatsoever. Yeah. And that hooked me. So I'm a fan of a freemium model where I can try for myself for an unlimited time or to a decent amount of testing and come to the decision that is good enough for me that I'm fairly going to invest some money in it.
Right.
Yeah?
Right. No, I'm absolutely right. And what was the enabler of freemium? Of course, the cloud. Yeah. Because before, like, you had to buy the server, put the place inside of the network. I mean, how would you do freemium, right? I mean, even in the it was overhead, right? Even where you could do freemium, right? Like the ERP vendor, right? SAP in the 90s could provide code to customers to try something out and then somehow take it away again. But yeah, it was just not the mentality. It's the cheap elasticity, both the technical and commercial elasticity of the cloud, which enables that. Right?
There are two obvious tracks to follow from here. So one is, and I will just mention them for time being, one is the legal parts. The legal risks companies put themselves into by not necessarily being able to explain why they took whatever decision. And the other part is, and that's the one I'd like to go in now as we just mentioned it again. So the cost of the data center or the data center as such, the provision of the service.
Right.
You're saying, so if you want to get big, use the infrastructure that's there. Yeah. Because oops, what is this? Am I still there?
You're here.
Something happened here on my screen. And the other.
What did Thomas say again?
The other observation is in how far is the external data center that a cloud data center is at some point in time becoming more expensive than whatever else is there.
Great. Yeah, great question, right? The forever question, right? So, and already on my technical hat on, right? Already 2015, I wrote the market overview about infinite compute platforms. Microsoft OpenAI, the Azure Stack requirement, and then everybody else followed, right? All the cloud vendors provide you an on-premise compute capability. The part is, right, which in your analogy between the public and the private data centers, you need to run the same software, right? Because building software, implementing software is super expensive, super painful, blood, sweat, and tears, right? So you want to have the way to move workloads between the public cloud, multiple public clouds, and on-premise as you need to do it, because of mainly, it used to be performance reasons, right? The speed of light, as we talked to, can be slow if you're geographically far. Legal reasons because of data statutory compliance questions, and then a large part is the not invented here part, right? Charles Phillips, who used to be the Infor CEO, worked with Oracle quite a lot, would always say, if I walk into a customer and the CIO is over 50, we're not going to do cloud. But he was younger, we're going to do cloud because he knows I have to deal with that technology, as an example, right? So the not invented here part is very, very big. However, right, things happen, right? So before the pandemic, we would say, if you know your workload really well, and there's no ups and downs, and you can plan for it, you're cheaper running your own data center. Absolutely right. My backup vendor went from the cloud to on-premise, and they're significantly cheaper. Right? And I hope they have no downturn when I ever need the backup. That's the problem. Then came the pandemic, right? Talking to CRM people here, right? What was the biggest problem commercially for Salesforce in the pandemic? Question for you guys, the experts.
I didn't really follow because I was concentrating on my screens here.
Oh, don't worry. What was the biggest what was the biggest commercial challenge for Salesforce in the pandemic? It was not that people aren't working. It was not the whatever virus taking people out, whatever, or building COVID applications. Right. The biggest problem of Salesforce was not talked about much, is right because they're running in their own data centers. 1/3 of their customers were not using their software. They were in pain. They couldn't pay their parts. They couldn't lower. They would lower the cost for them to run. They had to take up the hardware, data center, which they dimensioned it for.
No, but
Right?
their problem more is profitability.
Right. So, but any SaaS vendor who was in the public cloud, I pay less for your SaaS software if you use it less. Right. So big eye opener. Right. I had board members like who were always saying, I don't understand this cloud thing. They're all talking with non-technical people. All of a sudden, they say, now I got the cloud thing. I look at our office. This CapEx is not being utilized. Our delivery fleet, our construction equipment, right, would be so much smarter if we would lease it on demand, right? Why did we buy that super expensive grader which is sitting idle since 2.5 years of the 5-year lifetime, right? So that's the thing which happened since we said before. Question, Ralph?
I had the impression that the most urgent problem in Salesforce was missing leadership and having some wrong ideas in the area of rein in die Kartoffeln, raus aus der Kartoffeln, to quote a German saying, such as they jumped into everybody out of the office. Bravo, we can steer with a smartphone the whole organization and we show you how it is working. Now, having seen the start of this year 2 quarters ago, the challenges they had come by their investors or other economical, environmental challenges, which also hit other organizations as well.
Right.
But being on the throne on one of the top positions, it was very visible, such as suddenly they had a lot of problems. And this is my personal opinion, and nobody has to agree. But if somebody is quoting and always being the evangelist of CRM and future and is running around like a messiah and then showing up his smartphone and says, I can steer my whole organization by this, and then goofs it to a certain degree and has to set back and suddenly
gone for a bigger screen.
and should
run it on a tablet.
Probably that was an issue. He couldn't see all the red warning lights because the screen on his iPhone was too small. No,
I think we can do a separate call on this for probably 2 hours about all the things that went wrong at Salesforce, right? So I totally agree with you, right? So on all the points, right? I don't have to agree, but I agree with you, right? So
I don't want to bash them. It's simply that they are a lighthouse by their self-confidence and how they see themselves, and have sometimes a different perspective. Yeah.
Right. So I'm with you because I give like SAP another category hard time or Workday another hard time. If you're the perceived category leader, right, you have a duty to the industry to show some thought leadership and to take more risks than the other guys, right? I mean, if Salesforce loses 10% of market share, maybe commercially a big problem, right? But you have to take risks. And if you don't take the risks, you cannot create value and you will ultimately be disrupted. I use Salesforce as the example of the SaaS vendor running still their own data center, despite you knew you shouldn't be doing this. Not having the commercial elasticity to pass a lower cost of compute, which was Thomas' question with on-premise or in the public cloud back to customers.
So when the real point of that question was there's a trajectory at which it becomes cheaper again because the AWSs on this planet want to make their cut too.
Of course, but there's enough competition there, and not if your workload is not stable. I'll give you another example, right? Delta runs all of their booking system on a mainframe. Fantastic. They try to replace it because old and so on. IBM and Fennis has done a good job to bring modern code to the mainframe. You can do everything which you can do on modern servers on the mainframe. And it was only 10% of the IT budget. So there was no way for them doing it. Comes along COVID, and the mainframe is over 55% of the IT budget and idle. So the learning curve of board members, which are not technical, is like, I need to be careful on the CapEx we spend. This cloud thing makes sense. Even if I do God forbid we have now a pandemic, but my business goes up and down. Seasonality in my business, right? I need to have this elasticity as an enterprise to be able to pivot and not say, oh, we do this when our servers are written off in 2 years. We just went through a hardware refresh, right? So that's the problem.
just hitting on one thing I honestly admire, and I share the perspective of Thomas, who said kudos to Salesforce, who did for their AI a certain approach in security layers and rethinking a lot of the risk stuff, whereas I normally would love to hit on them, such as they take security and privacy not as responsively as they are taking it right now in that approach. And on the other side, how will Salesforce Starter enable the little ones to get the benefits out of that approach as well, as we firstly saw the price tag for a company, $360,000 to utilize all the fun of that beauty. Yeah.
That is helping the little ones, because that price tag gets a lot of startups thinking, hey, I should be in that space and give a run for the money to Salesforce for less money too. So that's perfect, right? So I see the fear concern on the other side. I say, like, please, Salesforce as a startup, make it 500,000, make it 500,000 to get in there, right? So perfect for me, right? So they've done a service to the industry. But then don't forget, right, the dirty secret of enterprise software is enterprise service discounting, right? Nobody is going to pay 300,000, right? So that's the important thing for the startups listening here to say, no, you can't charge 150,000. Salesforce will be there if you're at least selling to a large company as a Salesforce customer, right? So, but here's my thing, where if I was bold, had the mind, was a startup of generative AI and CRM, because we're running short on time, is I would look, and I give credit to, if you remember, great Gartner analyst, Jeff Goldman. He came up with the 6th generation of CRM, which Siebel built after. He said in generation 5, 6, there was this interactive selling system where demand finds supply, right? Where agents do the work, right? That's, to me, is the ultimate disruption to the CRM place, that I don't send people in tin boxes who don't want to travel anymore because they used to work from home, right? The traditional salespeople. Which always, like, for me, the rule, we can debate that for another one, right? The rule has who wins in sales wins in CRM, because the most money is there, right? A great salesperson will not be fired if they don't use a CRM system. A customer service agent or field service agent says, I don't like the software, said, fine, take a hike, right? I'm not going to keep them for that. So there's this volatility in the sales part. So the account manager. That's why I'm so against the CX thing, because if you talk in the CRM vendor, you talk about sales, and where's the CX in direct sales, right? So doesn't even exist, doesn't even apply to it. So I would look at the automatic brokering, bringing together on the planning side of what I have available and what I want to sell to who, to what price, which ultimately is what CRM is all about. And see what I can do.
Before we get to an end, because we are really almost hitting the hour, so the legal question that I briefly mentioned. So especially in, let's say, HR areas, let's take recruiting again, and a lawsuit-prone country like this one here, in how far, or what can companies do to protect them from the risk of me getting in there because I'm an old white guy, I feel discriminated by the algorithm, and they can't even say whether I am discriminated or not. So I sue them for $1 billion.
Yeah, I mean,
you're an immigrant.
No technology is affecting the litigious level and the money that can be made from lawsuits, right? So that's just the risk of life when you live in the US, right? So your traditional algorithm, which would be just sampling people, I take every 5th candidate, right, which is totally random, right? Which is good enough to sell stocks as an insider. If you say I'm going to take this and it's public, it's good enough for that. The courts have established that. You could get sued because you didn't do every 4th, right? So I would not worry for a moment on that, right? I would worry if I'm doing things which my competitors are doing, which allows them not to get sued, right? Then it's a business decision, right? Like if somebody is spending a lot of money to have every screenshot done, stamp done of their neural network, why they made a hiring decision, to go back and say, we don't know why it did it. This is unknown, but here's why it's documented why. And we know we made a mistake, and now we corrected it. Big problem, how synthetic data versus algorithm customizing. So I think if my competitor is spending like $1 million on documenting their AI decision, and that's helped them lawsuit, then I need to start thinking about this. But most likely at that point, my AI vendor has pitched me that feature already. So because when the competitor's AI vendor is giving them the snapshot of what the neural network has been saying as a feature capability compressed somewhere, but legally available if you need it, probably it's going to take less than 2-3 months at my AI vendor's pitching it to me. And then comes back to like any investment decision. Is this a good investment? Do I want to do this? How much risk do I do if I don't do it? Because I can't do everything. Yeah. So that's how I see that.
Again, a naysayer thing, yeah.
But there's no technology on Earth and planet in the solar system which will change the litigious nature of the US system, right? There's something which Congress needs to do, change the legal system. And then you avoid, oh my God, so many lawyers unemployed, right? And they can all be replaced by ChatGPT. Oh wait, that didn't go so well, but okay.
Lawyers in the US are what accountants are in Germany, right?
So every country has their scourge, right? So there are issues with someone, right? So
as we are on top of the hour, and I do not want to dig too much into July 4. Let's go to what we usually end with, the famous last words. So, to terminate the session, not you. we want to invite you one more time because it was great. So,
at least one more time.
So, what do you think or what would be your one recommendation to aspiring SaaS vendors who want to leverage the next generation of AI?
Yeah, like I said, like either you go for immediate revenue depending on your funding, right? And your investor's appetite for risk or your appetite to risk to put your resume on the line to build something phenomenal or build something which is a complete failure, right? Look at the low-hanging fruits if you're on a short-term schedule. Hopefully you make enough money to look at the bigger fruits, which I see in the interaction. I would stay away from the call center agent space because that's well done, well established, right? We will have agents talk to each other. I mean, I have my Pixel phone hold for me, right? And do phone reservation, restaurant reservation, hairdresser reservation, invoice since 3 or 4 years, something like this. So I don't see so much potential from that perspective. But then if you have more risk for appetite, look at the demand supply side, right? Who do I sell what to? Where do I send my salespeople if I still have salespeople on the road? If I'm outbound calling, who am I going to call? Who I'm going to do business with, right? How am I going to treat Marshall versus Ralph when they show up on my website, right? Who am I going to, like we talked about the omni-channel part, right? Who is doing, you guys know this, you do, I'm out of CRM since 20 plus years, right? Who calls a customer saying, hey, Ralph, I saw you on the website, let me help you. Creepy, right? Potentially, right? But bringing those things together, and then maybe not on a human calling, but hey, Ralph, here's your personal shopping assistant. I'm powered by software from so and so. I know you've trouble to find the red and black glasses. Let me help you find them, right? Or thank you. Do you need another pair of them? Or I just saw you posting on Twitter that you broke your glasses. Here's a new one. Or actively counter that. So listening to your customers, digital artifacts, and exhaust. And then using that, not scaling for humans, because there's not enough humans. We all run out of town, scaling through software. And AI is the automatic, deep learning is the automatism to get there, right? Here's my last part from the wisdom, right? This is so funny how we anthropologize, correct me what the right word is, I need to know this. These are not large language models. These are large knowledge models. Super large knowledge models. We just make them, I can talk to them, right? That's not the important thing. We could talk to stuff. They have processed all the English documents which were publicly available, legally, not legally, and so on. And to leverage that is massive from a context perspective.
Great stuff. Thanks a lot.
This was fun. Great questions.
It was, yeah. And thanks also in particular to Brian, if you are still listening.
Yeah, super. I wonder what's happening to his barbecue, right? Has he burned some stuff now? Does he have a boring 4th of July barbecue and he's listening to us here? So sorry, Brian. We'll hear it on Twitter how his barbecue is going.
Maybe he's in the UK. Okay. So thanks a lot to everybody who spent their July 4th with us. And see you next week.
Good decision.
Of course, a good decision.
Thanks for having me. Vielen Dank. Bis dann.
Going backstage. Bye.
Much appreciated.